Okay, so let's be honest. How many of us rely on caffeine to function? Seriously. But get this, that soda you're reaching for might not be getting its kick from coffee beans at all, but from, well, a lab.
Right.
Today we're diving into the hidden story of synthetic caffeine. What's really in your soda? We're gonna unpack why so many beverage giants are choosing the chemistry set over coffee beans.
Yeah, it's kind of wild when you think about it, right? Like
Yeah.
those big name sodas, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Mountain Dew, that caffeine, it's often synthetic.
Whoa, 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 back up. Are you telling me there aren't massive espresso machines hidden in those factories?
Yep, definitely not.
Okay, I'm hooked, but seriously, why synthetic? What's the deal?
Well, to be honest, it really comes down to money.
Makes sense. Those companies are all about the bottom line.
Exactly. Extracting natural caffeine from coffee beans or tea leaves. Super resource intensive. You're talking about harvests, global supply chains, even the weather impacting everything.
I never even thought about that.
It adds up, you know?
Yeah. So it's way cheaper to go the synthetic route, which, I mean, makes sense for companies making millions of these drinks, right?
Exactly. Plus, when you go synthetic, you get consistency. Every single can, every bottle has that precise caffeine dose. You can't always guarantee that with Mother Nature.
So it's no chance of accidentally getting a double shot of caffeine just because the coffee beans had a good year.
Precisely.
Hmm. You know, that makes me wonder, could cheaper sodas actually be flooding the market because of this cost difference? And is that contributing to some of the health issues we hear about with all that sugar and caffeine?
Oh, wow. That's a really interesting question and definitely something to think about as we dig deeper into this whole synthetic caffeine thing.
For sure. Okay, so it's cheaper, it's consistent, but how do they actually make this stuff? Do they have caffeine factories or something?
You could say that. It's not
Mhm.
as easy as just brewing a giant pot of coffee, but it's not like mad scientist territory either.
Our source actually breaks down the synthetic caffeine process into four main steps. So hit me with step one. What's the first thing they do?
All right, so step one, they start with these basic chemical building blocks. Urea, you know, that thing we talked about in fertilizer. They react that with something called chloroacetic acid.
Okay, that already sounds kind of intense for something ending up in my soda.
I know, right?
Familiar.
But those reactions, they're making the basic structure of the caffeine molecule.
So are we building a house here? This is the foundation?
Exactly. You gotta start with the framework before you can put up the walls and windows.
Gotcha. Okay, so what's next? What's step two in our caffeine construction project?
All right, so step two is where they bring in these things called methyl groups. And honestly, I won't bore you with the whole organic chemistry lesson, but
Good.
this is where the caffeine really gets its kick. This is what makes it, well, caffeine.
Oh, so it's not just about building any molecule. It's about getting those specific components in there to give us that boost.
Exactly. Yeah, you got it. And this is actually what makes caffeine different from all those other similar compounds out there.
Huh, the more you know, right? All right, so we've got our foundation. We've added in that get up and go element. What's next?
Step three, this is where it gets really cool. They call it cyclization. Basically, they use heat and they form those iconic caffeine rings.
Cyclization, huh?
Yeah, so imagine
Yeah.
you have this linear molecule,
Yeah.
all right, and then boom, they create this ring structure. It's kind of like if you're trying to connect the two ends of a necklace together.
Mm.
That's essentially what's happening at a molecular level. They're forming the ring structure that makes caffeine. Caffeine.
Okay. Okay, I think I'm getting it. So we've built our little caffeine molecule. It's got its kick. We made it into a ring. What's the final step? What happens next?
All right, so last step, but definitely not least, they put the caffeine through this purification and crystallization process.
Fancy.
Right. This just makes sure it's pure and ready to be mixed into your favorite drink.
So basically, we're taking that caffeine necklace and we're polishing it up, making sure it's ready for its big debut.
You got it. 100%.
Interesting stuff. So we've got this lab-created caffeine. It's going into our sodas. But here's the thing. You would never know it from looking at the label, would you?
Yep, not a chance.
Really?
Yeah, see, the FDA, they don't actually require companies to say if they're using natural caffeine or the synthetic stuff. They just put caffeine on the ingredients list and call it a day.
So it's kind of like a caffeine free-for-all on these labels, huh? So how do we become caffeine-conscious shoppers? What should we be looking out for?
You got to be a label detective.
Yeah.
Companies using natural caffeine, well, they're usually going to want to brag about it, right?
Right.
So look for stuff like caffeine extract or naturally derived caffeine. They're going to want you to know they're using the good stuff.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. But what if it just says caffeine? No fancy wording or anything?
It's probably synthetic, especially if it's one of those, like, big brands. Remember, they're all about that cost effectiveness.
True. True. Okay, but let's get to the real question here, the million-dollar question. Is there actually a difference between natural and synthetic caffeine once it's, like, in our system?
Hmm.
I mean, chemically speaking, aren't they the same thing?
You're totally right. Chemically.
Yeah.
Identical. Same molecule, same effect.
Okay, but I gotta ask about this because our source mentioned that some people say they feel a difference. Like some people say natural caffeine feels, I don't know, smoother, while the synthetic stuff might make them jittery or they crash harder. Is there any truth to that, or is it all in their heads?
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting. The research is kind of still catching up, but it seems like individual sensitivity could be a factor. It's like, you know how some people swear by that light roast coffee? They say it gives them a smoother energy boost.
Yeah, I get it.
It's possible that other stuff in those natural sources, like in coffee or tea, could actually be messing with how our bodies process the caffeine.
So it's not just the caffeine itself, it's also like what it's hanging out with in the drink. That's pretty wild.
Exactly. It's like going to a party solo versus rolling in with your whole crew.
Yeah.
The vibe is just different, right? And actually, it's funny you mention that. Researchers are finding something similar with cannabis these days. It's not just about the THC, it's how those other compounds are interacting with it, creating totally different effects.
Ah, who knew?
Yeah, more research is definitely needed, but it's super fascinating.
For sure. Well, I guess what I'm hearing is no matter what, it all comes back to just being mindful of our caffeine intake, right?
100%, yeah. I mean, natural or synthetic, the FDA recommends sticking to under 400 milligrams a day for most adults.
That's what, like 4 cups of coffee?
Pretty much, yeah. And it's easy to forget that all adds up, right? Especially with soda, chocolate, that afternoon energy drink.
Yeah, wow, you're right. I don't usually think about it like that. It's easy to forget how all those little caffeine hits throughout the day can add up.
Exactly. Being aware is like half the battle.
Yeah.
It lets you enjoy your caffeine without any surprises.
So true. Well, I have to say, this has been a serious eye-opener. The next time I'm reaching for that afternoon pick-me-up, I'll definitely be checking those labels a little more closely and maybe, opting for a cup of tea instead. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of synthetic caffeine. Until next time, stay curious, everyone.